Music is meant to be listened to and enjoyed, obviously, but another objective is to make money. When a record label or an artist put out an album, they likely want to make a bit of profit or at least recoup the money they put into it. However, that isn't always the case, and in some rare instances, the artists and labels actually have lost quite a bit of money, and in some instances, they've lost tens of millions of dollars. So join me today as we look into some of the most expensive album flops of all time. Now, I've talked about Chance the Rapper a few times on this channel, but we've never discussed how much money he actually lost on his 2019 album, The Big Day. And that's because it wasn't revealed until just this year. Chance the Rapper is an artist who had a very successful and promising career. He was putting out very successful mixtapes like 10 Day, Acid Rap, and Coloring Book. On top of that, he was working closely with Kanye and was featured on songs like Ultra Light Beam. Pretty much everybody loved Chance and was anticipating his debut album, but when it finally came out, fans were they weren't too pleased. The album was widely regarded as one of the worst or most embarrassing rap albums ever released and was viewed as corny by a lot of fans. And the main reason that people thought it was corny was because the core theme of the album was about Chance marrying his wife, who he's now separated from anyway. It was a pop rap slash gospel rap sort of album, and it wasn't received too poorly by critics, but the internet absolutely tore it up. And of course, there was this viral meme that I'll just play for you right now.
Oh, I love my wife. I love my wife. Let's go ride a bike with my wife. My wife's real young. My wife's real small. Let's go to the beach and play with a beach ball. Praise Jesus God and my wife. Let's go to the beach and ride a bike.
This situation became such a big meme that it even has its own page on Know Your Meme explaining everything. Chance was even arguing back and forth with fans on Twitter who were critiquing his album. He was arguing back and forth with this one guy for a little bit, constantly getting ratioed in the process, and people even thought he was hacked. Because of this, the album didn't do so well, debuting at number 2 on the Billboard 200 and selling 108,000 units first week, which isn't too bad, but because of how much the album costed, they didn't quite make their money back, and this is why. After releasing The Big Day, Chance was sued by his former manager Pat Corcoran for a breach of contract. He claimed that Chance didn't pay him what he was owed, which was over $2.5 million of reimbursed expenses supporting and promoting Bennett's career. The lawsuit also revealed that Chance's team overspent on records and other merchandise, which resulted in over $1 million in refunds and free items that were sent out to disappointed fans. And while we may not know exactly how much it costed to produce the album, we do know that there was a $1 million loss on the merch because of issues with the release, as well as the $2.5 million in what he owed the manager. I'm also guessing that with features from artists like DaBaby, John Legend, Shawn Mendes, Gucci Mane, Megan Thee Stallion, Lil Durk, Nicki Minaj, and more, with a stacked feature list like this, I doubt the album was cheap to make. But the biggest loss that we have confirmed so far is the tour. Fans had been theorizing that Chance had low ticket sales, saying that when he started the tour, they saw venues with like 18,000 capacities selling only around 2,000 to 3,000 tickets, which was confirmed when after 5 shows, his tour was canceled. He put out a post claiming that it was to focus on his family, but was later confirmed in the lawsuit that it was indeed because of poor ticket sales. Chance's former manager said that Chance was ignoring his advice about the album and even blamed him for the poor reception and poor ticket sales. The lawsuit says, instead of acknowledging the numerous distractions and artistic compromises that inevitably resulted from the time wasted in the studio, all of which contributed to a lackluster album, evidenced by historically low ticket sales, Bennett ultimately blamed Corcoran. It's also estimated that the cost to book venues, stage them, advances for workers, promotion of the tour, and every other cost that goes into it costed at the very least $1 million. So in total, thanks to the new information in Pat's lawsuit that has come out this year, it's estimated that this album lost anywhere from $4.5 to $6.5 million. And if you thought that was bad, well, Lady Gaga's album flopped so hard that people even think it led to layoffs at her record label. Lady Gaga, despite all of her success, somehow managed to create an album that undersold so much that people think it led to layoffs at the label. And here's how it happened. In 2011, Lady Gaga began production on her album ARTPOP. She was supposed to release it in early 2013, but she got a hip injury which needed surgery, so the album was postponed. Later that year, she released the first single from that album, Applause, and it hit number 4 on the Billboard. Then she went on this weird insecure Twitter rant comparing herself to other artists, like this one where a fan said, "Applause didn't debut at number 1. Katy Perry is better than her." To which she responded saying, "I write for the music, not the charts. Lady Gaga is a reductive Madonna copy. She's over now." To which Lady Gaga said, "Hashtag say what you want about me. I'm not sorry. On top of that, around this time, she also put out the song Do What You Want featuring R. Kelly. And now this was in 2013, and it was before R. Kelly was convicted, which happened in the 2020s, but he still had multiple allegations against him, so she faced some very strong criticism for this. Fans were even theorizing that she was just trying to use shock value because the first single underperformed. One fan on Reddit said, she really made a song with R. Kelly with the chorus saying, do what you want with my body, and had Terry Richardson direct the music video. She canceled the music video because it was called literally an ad for To this day, I still cannot fathom what the hell she was thinking. Apparently, this Terry Richardson guy was also accused of SA. Eventually, she deleted the song and replaced his verse, as well as apologized for it. But that was years later, so it didn't really help the album's rollout. Regardless, the album was released on November 6th of 2013, and it was received with some very mixed reactions. One critic said, art pop isn't the sound of an artist moving forward, but of one scrambling to maintain, if not reclaim, her position among today's pop elite. Multiple publications and fans said she was just trying to eliminate other popular artists from that time period. Regardless, the album did debut at #1 on the Billboard 200, but it undersold by a lot more than they thought it would. The release was also weird because she had just parted ways with her manager, which changed their promotion strategy, and they also released this weird app alongside the album. It was supposed to have like interactive chats and extra music and content, but after launch it didn't really work and it just kind of went away. But I bet it was also pretty expensive to make. Looking back, fans have said things like, art pop is just Lady Gaga's Bionic. Nobody got it when it was released. Nothing she did in that era was ever good enough for anyone. But when we look back at it, it's not a bad record, just out of place for its time. But how much did they actually lose on the album? Well, Interscope Records lost a reported amount of $25 million because of how expensive the promotion and production costed. And I bet that app didn't help either. Funnily enough, Lady Gaga actually made a ton of money on her tour, but Interscope either didn't get a cut or they got such a small cut that it didn't really help recoup the money they made from the album. Also, an article from Examiner that is now deleted claimed that because of how much it flopped, it caused layoffs at Interscope because they were doing layoffs around the same time. Although Gaga eventually tried to shut down the $25 million loss rumor. But it wasn't all good for her. She had a ton of backlash from the controversies, and also fans were just not into that album. So because of that, she actually left pop for a few years and made a jazz album. And while Lady Gaga's flop lost a lot of money due to controversies, Michael Jackson had some really bad label problems that caused them to lose even more money. Michael Jackson is undeniably one of the GOATs of all time, but even he managed to create an album that costed an ungodly amount of money that him and the label were not able to make back. And they ended up losing somewhere between $20 to $30 million. In the late 90s, MJ was having a bit of a tough time. He got divorced, he put out an album in 1997 that wasn't as successful as his typical albums because of a lack of promotion, and he explored some darker themes in it. But probably the hardest thing that he experienced around this time was a handful of child SA allegations. This was, and still is, to this day, extremely harmful to his reputation, despite the fact he was never convicted of anything. And another big thing that happened was a label dispute. Michael was having issues with Sony, his record label, which was resulting in less promotion of his work, less sales, and more issues when it came to production. Apparently, MJ didn't trust Sony and claimed that they were racist. According to The Age, in an unusual display for the reclusive Jackson, he drove around Manhattan in a bus on Saturday, calling Mr. Mottola a racist and picketing outside of Sony's offices. Someone else close to Sony said in response, if this is how he's trying to pressure Tommy to reassess his record deal or spend more money promoting Invincible, that is not going to happen. Now that we have the proper context, it was around this time that MJ began the production of his next album, Invincible. It was taking him a while to make since he was a bit of a perfectionist, and the label clearly wasn't happy. According to Damian Shields, after several postponements, it became apparent that Jackson was not interested in meeting their desired deadline, and as of early 1999, the label had not heard any of the new material he'd recorded in the preceding months. So obviously, his label was not happy about this. Creating the album was also very expensive, as Michael had to record in 11 different studios across the country. Then in October of 2001, Michael Jackson finally released the album Invincible. It did debut at #1, but it got mixed reviews from critics and the sales declined a bunch after the first week. So Sony decided to just stop promoting the album. Popular songs didn't get music videos and no tour was planned for the album. Because of this, in 2002, Michael Jackson went after the chairman of Sony, Tommy Mottola. He called him racist and devilish.
Sony, Tommy Mottola. Tommy Mottola is the president of the record division. He is a mean, he's a racist, and he's very, very, very devilish.
Into this way, and whoever else, artists that are on their label that are be sucks. Sony sucks. Sony sucks. I want to hear the guys in the back.
He even had a sign with his head that had devil horns. Michael was upset because not only did Sony fail to promote his album, but he said that they were trying to keep him stuck in his label contract until 2004. It also kept his masters until 2010, so understandably he wasn't happy about that. But some fans think that Sony wasn't entirely to blame. Someone on Reddit said, "It would have not sold as well as his previous albums anyway. This album was basically done per contract with Sony. There was nothing for him to prove at this point." Regardless, the label did end up terminating his contract and released a greatest hits album to fulfill it. He gave a little victory speech at a show after this happened.
Because the companies take advantage of them. They really do. And Sony, being being the artist that I am at Sony, I've generated several $1 billion for Sony, several billion, and they really thought that my mind is always on music and dancing, and it usually is, but they never thought that this performer, myself, would outthink them.
Yeah. This was pretty funny. But how much did he lose on the album? Well, according to various sources, the production of this album costed somewhere between $30 to $40 million, and the marketing costed around $25 million. Apparently, this makes it one of the most expensive albums ever made. And I guess they only did $20 million in sales, which leads to a reported loss of somewhere between $20 to $30 million. Because of all this, Michael was actually in a really bad place financially when he died. Well, not so much because of the album, but for other reasons. He had racked up a debt of over $500 million and apparently was spending over $20 to $30 million more per year than he was earning. Some people even theorize that his debt played a role in his drug use that led to his death, but that's just speculation. So technically Michael wasn't broke, he still had a ton of money, but I'm going to guess that his net worth was negative after that massive debt. A lot of these albums are very expensive, and one thing that costs a lot that you might not be aware of is your personal data. Without your consent, data brokers can steal your data and sell it to marketers, scammers, and even stalkers, which is why this video is sponsored by Aura. I don't know if you guys know this, but with just your phone number or your name or your address, people can type that in online and find a lot out about you. And I'm not sure about you guys, but that terrifies me. So that's why I love Aura. I've used it personally for a while now to remove my information from these websites automatically. It also alerts you if your personal info is found on the dark web and monitors your credit and banking in case of fraud. On top of that, they give you access to a secure VPN, antivirus software, and password manager, all of which are crucial to staying safe on the internet, and I personally use all of them. So rather than raw dogging the internet, use some protection and try Aura free for 14 days at www.aura.com/mattyballz. In those 2 weeks, you can see where your data is being exposed and sold. So make sure to check out the link in the description below. And now let's continue with the video. Chinese Democracy is an album by Guns N' Roses that was extremely expensive and took a decade to create. So when it ended up not doing so well, it was very costly. It all began in 1994 when Guns N' Roses decided to start working on an album called Chinese Democracy. Although they didn't make much progress the first few years, saying that they were all stoned all the time. Finally, they began working in 1997, but the band members started having some beef with one another. The guitarist said that the lead singer Axl was like a dictator. They already had some problems years prior with the guitarist Izzy Stradlin leaving the band. Part of the reason was because he was sober, but the rest of the band wasn't, and it was just a bad environment for him. So clearly there was a lot of internal issues going on. And by the time they actually started on the album, Axl was the only original member left. Early on in 1998, they had some financial issues already with how much they spent on the production. Apparently, the label even asked for the album to be released in 1999, but that didn't help. They also hired a lot of notable live musicians like the Nine Inch Nails guitarist, so it was even more expensive. They were renting tons of different studios, some for up to 5 months at a time, and they also had members coming and going. They used a total of 15 studios in the first few years of making the album, with the monthly cost of studios being pretty expensive, like $50,000 at the time. By 2000, they actually had a version of the album ready to go, but apparently they decided to change the whole thing up. For some reason, they began the Chinese Democracy tour in 2001, but even this got paused. By this point, the label was fed up and cut their funding because they were wasting so much money for so long without getting anything done. The label wrote a letter saying, having exceeded all budgeted and approved recording costs, by millions of dollars, it is Mr. Rose's obligation to fund and complete the album, not Geffen's. Rose was Axl's name, Axl Rose, and Geffen was the label they were under at the time. At the time, some were labeling this the most expensive album never made, because by this point he had spent $13 million on production costs. The same stuff happened for a few years, and then in 2007 the band reported that the album was about to be done. There was even a promo going on where Dr. Pepper said they would give everyone in America a free soda if they actually released the album in 2008. Then, in 2008, Chinese Democracy was finally released, so Dr. Pepper gave out free coupons to fans. Strangely enough, to try to recoup some of the $13 million they spent, Guns N' Roses brokered a weird deal with Best Buy. What they did is they sold the album to Best Buy for around $14 million, and for a period of time, Best Buy was exclusively selling the album. It got so bad that they were actually at some point selling the album for like $2 on clearance. So you could argue that Guns N' Roses profited $1 million because of the $14 million deal, but $13 million is only what they spent on production. We have no clue what they spent on marketing, but I'm gonna guess that it was a lot. The album overall, despite losing money, was also pretty rough as it exposed a lot of issues within the band like drug problems, it hurt their public image, and caused a lot of problems for them, especially with their label. And while this was an embarrassing struggle that the label had to deal with, I think Mariah Carey's label had it a whole lot worse. Mariah Carey's album Glitter underperformed severely, especially since it was released alongside a movie which resulted in tens of millions of dollars in losses. It all started back in the 90s when Mariah signed to Columbia Records, whose CEO is Tommy Mottola. If you remember, Tommy is the evil guy that had beef with Michael Jackson earlier. Well, him and Mariah ended up actually getting married, which is kind of strange because he was 20 years older than her and she was only 24 at the time. But as she would later write in her memoir, Tommy was very controlling. She said, "You might want to picture a controlling father figure or a prison warden." Even with all of her success, she said that Tommy and the label were forcing her into this sort of safe pop star image rather than her actually writing and singing about whatever she wanted to and her experiences. I mean, they made her release a Christmas album, and despite how successful it was, I'm sure that isn't most artists' first choice. Mariah tried to shift more towards hip-hop and R&B, but the label wasn't really letting that fly. So eventually, she divorced Tommy and left the label, putting out the album Butterfly, which blended the genres she finally wanted to blend. And while it was liberating, she signed to Sony's Virgin Records for $80 million, so that with this newfound freedom, she could make a movie and accompany it with her own soundtrack. She said to MTV, "I wanted to make an album that reflected my love for 80s music and what it meant to me." Mariah was going to play the lead role in the movie and also co-produce it herself. She began working on the Glitter album, trying to mix a bunch of genres that she was a fan of, and it didn't take too long to complete. By 2001, they began promoting the movie and the soundtrack. They were dropping teasers, they put out a single, and they were doing interviews. It came out through the promotion that Virgin Records had invested over $22 million in producing the movie, and even more in promotion. But during this promotion, she made a really strange appearance on MTV's TRL, where she was handing out popsicles, talking in a strange way, and looked kind of confused. A lot of fans think looking back it wasn't as crazy as the media made it out to be, but back then people were acting like she was tweaking. Then she put out these voice messages on her website talking about mental health and things like that, clearly as promo for her album and her way of expressing her previous label struggles.
Singing for the night, and I am about to continue writing a nice song, and at that point I will try and go to sleep and get up and do it again. So I'm almost done. Still in Spain, and pretty soon I'm going to be doing the video, and I don't exactly know what I'm doing for the video yet because we have to incorporate the movie and stuff like that. So, yeah, if you have any nice ideas, let me know.
Days later, she was hospitalized for extreme exhaustion, likely from promoting her album and movie too much and also being stressed out. Like I said, there were a ton of theories going around this time that she was like some sort of nut job, and she addressed this in an interview saying, "There's been so much written and reported about me over the past year. It wasn't like I went schizo and needed to be put in a straitjacket or tried to kill myself. What they were saying, I just think it's time to set the record straight." Because of this though, they took a break from the promotion, which definitely hurt the launch of the album, but something was about to happen that was going to hurt the launch of the album a whole lot more. Mariah Carey released the album Glitter on the morning of September 11th, 2001. and we all know what happened that day. So because of that, nobody paid any attention to her album. And once people were comfortable checking out the music that had come out recently, they saw that Jay-Z released his album The Blueprint the same day, so they listened to that instead. This led to her album debuting at number 7 on the Billboard 200, which is a whole lot worse than what people expected. People did enjoy the album though, at least those who listened to it. 10 days later, her movie was released and it scored a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes and later went down to a 6, which is really bad. People said that she was a horrible, emotionless actor. After a year, the movie only grossed $6 million of its $22 million budget, and the soundtrack only sold 2 million copies worldwide. Her record label was in a panic and bought her out of her contract, paying her $28 million. So Mariah decided to disappear for a while. We don't know exactly how much the label lost on this album, but they had her to a 5-album deal and bought her out after just 1 album because of how bad it went down. So because of that, I've even seen a few sources saying that they lost like $50 million. And we don't know the exact amount, but it's definitely up there with something like Michael Jackson's album. On the bright side for Mariah, Glitter came back in 2018 with fans saying justice for Glitter, trying to revisit the album in more of a positive light, and it actually hit number 1 on iTunes, so maybe the label started making a little bit more money. Regardless though, it didn't do so well. If you like this video, you might like my video on artists who stole their biggest songs, where we talk about copyright disputes and some interesting things like that. Anyways though, if you enjoyed, please make sure to leave a like and even consider subscribing down below. Other than that, it's been your boy Matty Balls, and I will see you guys next time.